Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest-serving prime minister, defined the politics for a generation. Ups and downs of Japan's longest-serving prime minister. Tokyo CNN. Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot during a campaign speech Friday in Nara. He was 67. Abe was pronounced dead by doctors at the Nara Medical University Hospital in central Japan at 5:03 p.m. local time. He was admitted into hospital in the state of cardiac arrest, and the medical staff were unable to stop the excessive bleeding, doctors said during a press conference on Friday. Abe served two separate terms as Japanese leader for the right-leaning Liberal Democratic Party, the first from 2006 to 2007 and again from 2012 until 2020. His second stint was the longest consecutive term for a Japanese head of government. Japanese politician Shinzo Abe attends the Party for Political fundraising at a hotel in Tokyo on April 14, 2022. Abe will be remembered for boosting defense spending and pushing through the most dramatic shift in Japanese military policy in 70 years. In 2015, his government passed the reinterpretation of Japan's post-war pacifist constitution, allowing Japanese troops to engage in overseas combat with conditions for the first time since World War II. Abe argued the change was needed to respond to a more challenging security environment, a nod to a more assertive China and the frequent missile tests in North Korea. During his term, Abe sought to improve relations with Beijing and held a historic phone call with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in 2018. At the same time, he tries to counter Chinese expansion in the region by uniting Pacific allies. After leaving office, Abe remains the head of the largest faction of the ruling LDP and remained influential within the party. He has continued to campaign for the stronger security policy and last year angered China by calling for a greater commitment from allies to defend democracy in Taiwan. In response, Beijing summoned Japan's ambassador and accused Abe of openly challenging China's sovereignty. Abe bows to applause from lawmakers of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party after winning the party's presidential election on September 20, 2006. Abe was born on September 21, 1954, in Tokyo to the prominent political family. Both his grandfather and grand-uncle served as prime minister, and his father was the former secretary general of the LDP. He studied politics at Tokyo's Seiki University and the University of Southern California, but initially entered the business, taking a position with Kobe Steel in 1979. 3 years later, he became an assistant to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Abe was first elected to Japan's House of Representatives in 1993 at age 38. He held a number of cabinet positions throughout the 20s and in 2003 became Secretary General of the LDP. 4 years later, he was named the party's president and became Prime Minister of Japan. His first term was marred by controversies and worsening health, and he stepped down as party leader and prime minister in 2007. The end of Abe's first term opened the revolving door in which five different men held the prime minister post in 5 years until his re-election in 2012. He stepped down in 2020 citing ill health. Diplomatic record. Abe was a prominent figure on the world stage. He cabineted strong ties with Washington, Tokyo's traditional ally, and the attempt to build a personal relationship with the former United States President Donald Trump, traveling to New York to meet the newly elected Republican president, while former President Barack Obama was still in office. During that unofficial meeting in 2016, Trump's the first with any world leader, Abe hailed the US Japan alliance and said he wanted to build trust with the new president. He strongly supported Trump's initial hard line on North Korea, which matches the Abe's own hawkish tendencies. Abe escorted then President Donald Trump during a welcome ceremony at Akasaka Palace on November 6, 2017. But as Washington's relationship with Pyongyang tipped toward diplomacy, with both Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in holding historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Abe appeared to be sidelined. No meeting was scheduled between Abe and Kim, and in September 2019, the Japanese leader said he was still determined to meet him. Abe wanted to normalize the relations with North Korea and ease tensions on the Korean peninsula. But his first priority was to bring some closure for the families of Japanese citizens adopted by North Korea in the 1970s and 80s. During his tenure, Japan's relations with South Korea soured. The two countries were engaged in the major dispute in which trade and military intelligence deals are scrapped, partly due to the legacy of World War II and Japan's brutal colonization of the Korean peninsula. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe celebrating in Buenos Aires after Tokyo was chosen as the host city for the 2020 Summer Olympics in September 2013. Olympics Super Mario success and setback. Abe came to office during a time of economic turmoil and soon sat after rebooting Japan's economy after decades of stagnation. Soon after he was re-elected prime minister in 2012, he launched the grand experiment popularly known as Abenomics. It included the three so-called arrows: massive monetary stimulus, increased government spending, and structural reforms. Abe's allies praised the plan for reviving the country's economy and boosting consumer and investor confidence. But after a strong start, it faltered, and in 2015, Abe fired three new arrows designed to boost the gross domestic product, and he hopes that they might eventually hit their mark were dashed when COVID 19 swept through the country in 2020, tipping Japan into recession. One of Abe's major domestic achievements was securing the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Abe delighted video game fans all around the world when he famously dressed as Japanese icon Super Mario during the closing ceremony for the Rio Games in 2016 to introduce Tokyo as the next host city. Shinzo Abe dressed as Super Mario holds the Red Ball during the closing ceremony of the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. In an instantly meme-able segment, Abe wearing an oversized red cap was shown emerging from the green pipe as the sounds of a Super Mario video game echoed around the Maracana Stadium. But the success of a much anticipated Tokyo Games was ultimately undone by the COVID 19 pandemic, which forced the competition to be postponed to 2021. An initial unwillingness to delay the games was partly credited for Japan's slow response to the coronavirus pandemic, which hit the country early in 2020. Abe declared the state of emergency months after the first cases were detected. His administration was also criticized for the low rate of testing and an early lack of specialist medical equipment to treat the rising number of patients. More successful was Abe's handling of abdication of Emperor Akihito, the first Japanese monarchy to step down in 2 centuries. He was succeeded by his son Emperor Naruhito in October 2019, starting the Reiwa era. Like the flowers of the plum tree blooming proudly in spring after the cold winter, we wish the Japanese people to bloom like individual flowers with the promise of the future. With such a wish for Japan, he decided to open Reiwa, Abe said on announcing the new era. Abe is survived by his wife Akie Abe, nee Matsuzaki, who he married in 1987. The couple did not have children.